The man and his past. He had once been full of dreams, driven by the hope of a better future. As a young man, he had envisioned a life where hard work would lead him to success, where every effort would bring him closer to stability and happiness. But life, as it often does, had other plans. At first, the struggles were manageable, an unexpected expense here, a missed payment there. But soon, the weight of his financial burdens became too much to bear. Bills stacked up relentlessly, and every attempt to climb out of debt only seemed to sink him deeper. He had tried everything: long hours at exhausting jobs, side businesses that never took off, borrowing from friends who eventually stopped answering his calls. Nothing worked. Desperation crept in like a slow-moving storm, darkening his days and keeping him awake at night. With no one left to turn to, he made choices that in hindsight he would forever regret. He convinced himself that there was no other way, that the system was against people like him, and that taking shortcuts was the only means of survival. What began as small compromises soon escalated into irreversible mistakes, and before he could fully grasp the consequences, he found himself at the mercy of the law. Now, seated in a courtroom, he stared at the floor, unable to meet the gaze of the people who would decide his fate. The air was thick with judgment. His past mistakes had caught up to him, and there was no escaping the verdict that awaited. He thought of his family, of the people who had once believed in him. He thought of the version of himself that had existed before the weight of life had crushed his spirit. The boy with big dreams, the man who had worked tirelessly to create a future. Where had he gone? Regret was a bitter taste in his mouth, but it was too late for that now. The system had made its decision. There was no redemption for someone like him. His life, as he knew it, was over. And then, something unexpected happened. If you believe in leadership, power, and second chances, this is the place for you. Hit that like button, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to never miss an inspiring Trump story. The arrival of Donald Trump. Just as the weight of final judgment was about to descend upon the man, something unexpected happened. A murmur rippled through the courtroom as an unmistakable presence filled the space. A name that carried power, influence, and an undeniable ability to shape destinies had entered the scene. It was Donald Trump. He had not come by accident. He had heard of this case, of the man who had once been full of promise, who had fought against an unforgiving world, only to make choices that led him down a dangerous path. The story had reached him through channels he trusted, and something about it struck a chord deep within him. He knew all too well what it meant to be doubted, to stand against impossible odds, and to be judged before having the chance to prove one's worth. There were those who would have ignored the situation, dismissing it as just another case in a system that moved forward without looking back. But Trump was different. He understood that beneath every failure, there existed the potential for redemption. He had built his own empire on resilience, standing tall in the face of adversity, and he knew that sometimes all a person needed was one chance, one opportunity to rewrite their fate. His presence alone commanded attention. It was not merely the stature of a businessman, a leader, or a public figure that set him apart. It was the unwavering confidence of a man who had fought his own battles and emerged stronger. He walked with purpose, his every step carrying an unspoken message. Something was about to change. Those in the room, from the attorneys to the spectators, fell silent. The man who had resigned himself to a grim fate lifted his eyes, disbelief flickering across his face. He had never met Donald Trump before, had never imagined that someone of such prominence would take an interest in his situation. And yet here he was, standing before him, looking directly into his soul, as if he saw something no one else had. Trump did not waste time with pleasantries. He was a man of action, and he knew that moments like this did not require grand speeches. They required conviction. His gaze was firm, unyielding, and carried a depth that only those who had faced true adversity could recognize. He knew that what he was about to say had the power to change everything. He had come not to judge, but to challenge, not to condemn, but to remind the man before him that his story was not over. There was still a choice to be made, and Trump intended to make sure he saw it. This was not just another case. This was a moment where a life could be saved, where the course of a future could be rewritten, and Donald Trump, the man who had defied expectations his entire life, had stepped in to ensure that this moment would not be wasted. Donald Trump stood face to face with the man, his gaze unwavering. There was no hesitation, no unnecessary formality, only the weight of the moment and the undeniable presence of a man who had seen both triumph and failure firsthand. He had built and rebuilt, lost and won, faced the doubts of others and still emerged stronger. Now in front of him was a man who had lost faith in himself, a man who had been pushed to the very edge, convinced that his future had already been decided. Trump saw something deeper than the mistakes that had led him here. He saw a person trapped not just by the justice system, but by his own mind, a man who had convinced himself that he was beyond redemption, and Trump knew that belief was the real prison. Without breaking eye contact, he spoke, his voice calm but firm, carrying the weight of experience and authority. "You made a mistake, but that doesn't mean your story is over." The words hit like a jolt. The man blinked, as if struggling to process them. He had spent so long expecting condemnation that the idea of anything else felt foreign. "What are you going to do now?" Trump continued. "Will you let this define you? Will you sink deeper into failure, believing there's no way back? Or will you stand up and prove that you are greater than this moment?" A lump formed in the man's throat. He had heard many things throughout his life: criticism, judgment, pity, but never words like these. Words that didn't dismiss his mistakes, yet refused to let them be. The final chapter. His lips parted, but his voice failed him. The emotions he had buried for so long suddenly overwhelmed him. His chest tightened, and before he could stop himself, tears welled up in his eyes and began to fall. For years he had felt invisible, nothing more than a statistic in a world that moved forward without him. But now, in this moment, someone was looking at him not as a lost cause, but as a man who still had a choice. Trump didn't flinch at the tears. He had seen it before. People breaking under the weight of their own regrets, realizing that they were at a crossroads. Some would crumble, accepting their fate as inevitable. Others would find a spark inside themselves, a fire that had almost gone out but was not yet extinguished. "Strength isn't never failing," Trump continued. "It's what you do after you've failed. It's how you choose to rise when the world expects you to stay down." The man felt something shift inside him. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it was there, a flicker of belief, not in a miracle, not in a sudden undoing of his mistakes, but in the possibility that he could be more than them. Trump took a step closer, his voice dropping slightly, carrying the weight of someone who had lived through storms and emerged stronger. "I don't care what they say about you. What matters is what you do next." The man clenched his fists. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, he didn't feel like a man waiting for his fate to be decided by someone else. He felt like a man who still had a say in his own destiny, and that changed everything. Donald Trump's journey is filled with resilience, bold decisions, and unforgettable moments. Stay inspired, like this video, drop a comment below, and subscribe to be part of this movement. A new chance. The room had been silent for what felt like an eternity. Every person present had witnessed something rare, an intervention that no one had expected, an appeal not for leniency but for purpose. Donald Trump had not spoken of excuses or pity. He had not minimized the mistakes that had been made. Instead, he had placed a challenge before the man, an opportunity to rise above his past and carve a different future. The judge, who had remained a quiet observer through it all, took a deep breath. He had seen countless cases, had handed down sentences that followed the strict letter of the law. But justice was not only about punishment, it was also about understanding when a man deserved a chance to reclaim himself. And for the first time in a long while, he saw something he had not expected in the defendant's eyes, a flicker of something beyond regret, a fight, a realization that perhaps it was not too late. With measured words, the judge made his decision. Instead of a severe sentence, instead of condemning the man to years that would strip away any chance at redemption, he chose a different path, a program that would not only hold him accountable for his actions, but force him to rebuild, to work, to contribute, to prove that he was more than his mistakes. Trump did not smile in victory. He had not come seeking applause or recognition. He had stepped in because he believed in something many others did not, that some men, when given a true second chance, do not waste it, that given the right opportunity, a person could rise not just for themselves, but for those who had lost faith in them. He made a promise, not in words of empty assurance, but in action. He would ensure that the man had a path forward, not a handout, not an easy way out, but the means to prove himself. He would have to work, to show discipline, to earn back the dignity that had been slipping through his fingers for too long, and Trump would hold him to it. The man walked out of the courthouse that day, not as a free man in the traditional sense, but as something more significant, someone with a responsibility. He was not just leaving behind the walls of a courtroom. He was stepping into the weight of expectation. The world had given him one final chance, and it was up to him to prove that it had not been wasted. For the first time in years, he did not feel defeated. He did not feel forgotten. He felt something he had lost long ago, determination, and Donald Trump had been the one to ignite it. Every great leader leaves a legacy. Be part of the conversation. Smash that like button, share your opinion in the comments, and make sure to subscribe for more powerful Trump insights. Years passed, and the man who had once sat in despair, awaiting a fate he believed was sealed, was no longer the same person. His journey had been anything but easy. There were moments when doubt crept back in, when the weight of his past threatened to pull him under once more. But something had changed in him the day Donald Trump stood before him and spoke words that shattered his own self-defeat. He had left that courtroom not just with a second chance, but with the burden of proving that he was worthy of it. And that was exactly what he did. He threw himself into the work, embracing the discipline and responsibility that had once seemed so distant. He committed himself to learning, to rebuilding not just his career but his character. He worked longer hours than he ever had before, refused to take shortcuts, and made sure that every opportunity given to him was one he earned. At first, there were those who doubted him, those who assumed that he, like so many others, would fall back into old habits, that his past would always define him. But he had been given a choice that few ever received. He had been seen, truly seen, by a man who understood that failure was not the end of a person's story unless they allowed it to be. And that knowledge fueled him. With time, his small efforts grew into something greater. He went from simply surviving to thriving. He built a business, not through luck, not through privilege, but through an unrelenting determination to prove that he was more than his mistakes. He created something meaningful, something that would outlive his past and stand as a testament to the power of resilience. As the years went by, his success was no longer just his own. He reached out to others who had walked the same difficult path, those who had stumbled and found themselves lost in a world that often refused to forgive. He mentored them, gave them opportunities, and reminded them of what had once been said to him, that their failures did not define them, but what they did afterward would. People often asked him how he had managed to turn everything around, how he had gone from the brink of ruin to becoming a respected entrepreneur, a man who now gave hope to others. His answer never changed. Because someone believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. It was a simple statement, but it carried the weight of a lifetime. It was a reminder that sometimes all it took to alter the course of a person's future was a moment, one voice cutting through the noise of self-doubt, one person willing to stand in the gap when the rest of the world had given up. That moment had come in the form of Donald Trump, a man who had seen beyond the mistakes, beyond the failures, and had spoken not to the man he was, but to the man he could become. And because of that moment, his life was forever changed. Strength, strategy, and vision. If these qualities inspire you, you're in the right place. Show your support by liking this video, commenting your thoughts, and subscribing for more.